All
I'll just,
right. Well, hi, everyone. My name is Teresa Gu. I am a recent graduate from Academy of the Canyons. Um, in my free time, so talking about hobbies, in my free time, I like to knit, crochet, and when I get the chance to, I do like to swim and ice skate. I'll be going to UC Berkeley in the fall, and I will be an econ major. Some fun facts about me are that I was actually born in Honolulu, Hawaii. I moved here when I was about 6, so I've been in California for the most recent 12 years. Some other fun facts about me include that I recently started watching Bridgerton, which I have to say is quite a fun show, and my most recent food craving is Buldak ramen. Before we get started, I want to briefly talk about my academic background since it's a bit non-traditional. Academy of the Canyons is a middle college high school, which is a bit different from your normal comprehensive public high schools. So my high school offers num a limited number of high school level classes, all of which are generally at the honors level. The way we graduate and meet our ACG requirements is by taking classes at the local community college, College of the Canyons. I also graduated with an AA degree from becoming IGETI certified in both the UC and CSU system. Being IGETI certified essentially means that the CSU, in my case, means that the CSU and UC system both acknowledges that I have finished all general education requirements. So that's a little bit about my academic background.
all right. Thank you, Teresa. So I'm going to start off with the first question that we have for you. And it's why did you want to major in your case, economics? And yeah.
So I will say that I bounced back and forth between majors quite a bit in high school. Originally, I wanted to do something in business administration or management, but when I was actually applying to colleges, I began to realize that it might not have been what I really wanted to do. So I looked into majors that were similar or kind of close to what I wanted to do in my future career, and I came across economics. I felt like economics could get me into the jobs and professions that I really wanted while giving me an education that I thought would be really beneficial. Economics at schools like Berkeley and business economics at schools like UCLA are actually STEM majors. They have a very quantitative basis and they're very math focused. And I think that will help me develop the skills I need to get into other career fields if I decide to change.
Okay, thank you. Which classes in high school helped you the most? And in general, like, would you recommend, are there any classes you recommend for those pursuing a similar major?
That's a really good question. So I didn't know that I wanted to do econ until senior year, but if I were to single out a couple of classes I took in high school, I would say it would be classes like pre-calculus, Calc 1, classes like Calc 2, which I'm actually taking right now, and other things like Introduction to Business, or what we call Business 100. I think those really helped me gain a bit of background and more knowledge.
All right, thank you. So what extracurriculars, teams, or organizations were you a part of in high school? And do you think participating in any of these activities benefited your choice of major?
So in my high school itself, I wasn't doing too many extracurriculars. My school's very, very small and we don't have a lot of funding for it. If we're talking about things that I only did in school, I did participate in a few clubs, but I definitely did more extracurriculars outside of the school. So, for example, I've been a member of cheer for basically all 4 years of high school. I also held many officer positions in cheer. I was also a member and officer in CACAYC. On top of that, I also created my own community service organization. This was mainly for the first couple of years of high school. I can talk more about that later as needed. And I also had another organized nonprofit organization I'm a part of that was a co-president of, which is called Math Matters. And that was a mainly online service. To talk a little bit further about some of these extracurriculars or organizations, with the one that I started up myself, I named it Music Magically. I started it during the COVID pandemic, and the main purpose of our organization was to do virtual instrument tutoring sessions between high schoolers and children that were a little bit younger. We had a pretty decent impact. We have multiple pairs of tutors and students, and we were able to actually see results with our students even in this non-traditional online environment. I'm sure that you guys are, generally speaking, well, know a lot about cheer and perhaps even CACYC. With my other nonprofit organization called Math Matters, I also started there when I was around 13 years old. And I kind of worked my way through different positions. I was a tutor, I was a co-director, I was a vice president, and most recently, I was a co-president. That one really helped me a lot, I think, in determining some things that I was interested in. It actually helped a lot in me figuring out that I wanted to do something in the business sector. And I feel like that really helped to bloom my application a little bit to see my growth and some of my other interests like tutoring and education.
Wow, that was a lot. That was really good. So, since you did all that, did you like get into any other colleges, and why didn't you choose them? Why did you choose Berkeley out of all of them?
So that's actually a really nice question. When I was younger, I actually told people that my dream school was UC Santa Barbara. The story behind why I said that is kind of long, but I did actually get into UC Santa Barbara. And the reason I chose Berkeley over any of the other schools I applied to was because Berkeley actually has the strongest economics program out of all of the UCs. Berkeley is ranked, I believe, number three or number four in the state for the economics program. So I felt like it was a pretty good choice for me. On top of that, I like the location, I like the other opportunities Berkeley has to offer, and that really helped me make my final choice.
Okay, so no regrets at all, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Um, oh, okay. Next question. Why do you think you got into Berkeley? Like, what do you think on your application made you stand out from others?
Hmm. I do feel like there's a lot of ways you can stand out. I think there's a specific way that I stood out that I actually wasn't aware of until after the entire process was over. One of the facts about Berkeley is that Berkeley is very fond of people who want to advocate for social change. Overall, you see that Berkeley has a lot of student protests. Even in like recent months, we have seen that quite a lot. And me personally, I started high school in 2020, right after, well, during the pandemic, where there was a lot of Asian hate and we saw the Stop Asian Hate movement. So I tried to do some work in that area with helping to keep communities educated about one another. I actually hosted the virtual online camp between the Asian American community and the African American community. And that was probably one of my biggest projects ever, especially considering the circumstances. On top of that, I actually continued talking about this in my PIQs. If you guys remember from this is a really big project from SCB Chair. We collaborated with the city of Santa Clarita to host a Chinese culture celebration. And I wrote about that event in very great detail in one of my PIQs and why I choose to do things like this. And I think that trait of mine really helped me stand out when people were reading my application since it aligned so greatly with that of the universities.
Okay, so on the topic of talking about like what you did for extracurriculars, did you do any like community service or volunteer work? And if so, what were they and how did they benefit you?
Oh, definitely. I did quite a lot of volunteer work. Some of them were very, very concentrated. Others were definitely a little bit more spread out. So one of the main things I did during my 4 years of high school was working with children or doing tutoring. Like I mentioned, I created my own community service organization for music tutoring. I was a math tutor. I was actually also an English tutor during the pandemic with the organization CACOIC to teach children in Wuhan. So that was a very big chunk of my volunteering and service work. But I also did a lot of other things that are a little bit smaller. For example, I also organized things like the summer interview series. I did things such as Cheers Lunar New Year Festival. So my volunteer service is a little bit scattered across the area, but you can definitely see a focus and a peak in tutoring, working with kids, and definitely in leadership positions.
Ah, okay. So how did they align with your college requirement? I mean, the Berkeley's requirements.
I'm sorry, can you clarify? Do you mean
Uh,
requirements as in college preferences?
yeah, probably like that.
Okay, so we know that the UCs, generally speaking, really like to see people who are engaged with their community. So I think in my case, I was able to show that I'm very engaged with my community on a few focal points, right? I was very interested in helping children get more chances to educate themselves, such as with music tutoring. Music lessons are very, very expensive, and we offered them for free in this online setting. So I think that was kind of helpful as well. That was helpful in helping the college see little parts of me. And I think overall, just showing service, whether that's through just tutoring or through my leadership positions, I think that helps the college see what my strengths are and what I could potentially do for them when I'm on campus.
All right, thank you. Did you apply for any like scholarships for college, like to pay for the fees?
So I did try to do a few scholarships. I will be honest, senior year was so much more hectic than I imagined, so I wasn't able to do as many as I would have liked. However, I did apply for one scholarship through the SCV Scholarship Foundation. I actually only applied to one scholarship locally, but that one was really nice because it sent my application to a bunch of local scholarships, and I was able to get a scholarship of $1,000 from Saugus Strong.
If you like remember the names of any of them, do you mind like putting them in the chat for everybody to see?
Um,
Like,
you just
it's fine if you don't,
It was
but
just one big application and they
hmm.
sent it out to a bunch of scholarships. The scholarship foundation is called the SCV Scholarship Foundation. I can see if I can type that up for you.
Okay, thank you.
And I think that's spelled correctly. Can you guys
Okay.
check it for me?
Yeah, we can see it. Thank you.
Okay.
So because your school was like a little different, do you think any of the like dual enrollment or like the college courses you had to take AOC were helpful or like they benefited you in ways that your high school couldn't have? I don't know if that makes sense, but
Just to make sure I'm interpreting this correctly. I think you're asking like how my dual enrollment classes helped me in comparison to what the classes my high school offered me were like.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, so I think this has to start with what my high school is like. So my high school offers very, very limited classes. And because of the way I took classes, I actually only got to have 2 years of high school math. The rest of my math classes are all taken at the college level. So I think in that regard, it was quite helpful, although I can't tell how that compared with classes that are taken at comprehensive high schools like Westridge or other schools. I do feel like taking it in a college setting was really helpful because it kind of mimics what it would be like at the university level. And there are some pretty unique challenges that you'll face when you're a high school student in these classes. I will say that one of the differences that I noticed was that my school has some kind of interesting requirements. So, because of certain limitations as a dual enrollment student, I have a unit minimum and a unit maximum from the university, and I'm not allowed to register in certain types of classes. So, in all 4 years of high school, I actually only got to take one economics class, which I took in my spring semester senior year. So there are definitely some limitations that I face, but overall, I think it's a really good experience to be dual enrolled because there are still a lot of options. And you can also really dive into topics that you're interested about, such as for me, it was psychology. And I got to take a lot of classes in that particular area and learn a lot about my interests.
Okay, thank you. So, what was like the overall application process like for you then? Like, how did you get your teacher references? Was it easy? Was it stressful for you? When did you start preparation? Any tips?
Okay, so the whole college application process can be a little bit long. I will say I started preparing to do college applications in the summer between junior and senior year. I started around early midsummer. One of the things for me was actually figuring out where I wanted to apply to. I was a little bit on the fence about whether or not I wanted to apply to private schools or schools out of state, but I ended up only applying to UC schools and CSU schools. I actually applied to all 9 UCs and CSUN. So making that decision really helped to first narrow down my process. So I began planning how I was going to write all of my PIQs. I started with brainstorming, as most people do, and then I just began my writing process. Part can be kind of tedious. So my tip for when you're writing these essays is to like do some brainstorming, but then make sure you pause and just give one of your ideas a go. If you're struggling, put them on one of those spinning wheels, like on your computer, spin it, choose one of your brainstorming ideas, and just give yourself a chance to go for it and try that out. I do wish I focused a little bit more on writing during the summer. I actually had to do a lot of my writing during the fall semester, which wasn't the best, but I definitely hit all of my deadlines. I actually submitted over a week early, if not like nearly 2 weeks early. So I was definitely quite on top of that. Outs, I'm trying to think. If I was to give another tip, is that sometimes these applications can be a little bit daunting. There's a lot of information that you have to fill out, and you want to make sure you do it correctly. My recommendation, if you're in a situation like mine, I only had 2 applications. One was the one for UC, one is the one for the CSU system. I highly recommend starting with the easier college application process and getting that over with. The CSU system only asks for you to report your personal information and grades. I don't believe there's anything that you have to write for it. So that's something you just really want to get done and over with. It makes you feel good, and then you can move on to something else. Another really important thing to keep in mind is that you are self-reporting all of your grades when you're using the CSU and UC application portals. Make sure you do that correctly. If you need to, print out a transcript and then just put things in accordingly. I think those are some of my main tips. Do you have any follow-up questions for that?
No, I think I'm good. Yeah, I'm good.
Um, oh, actually, I have one follow-up question, sorry. Is there anything you would have done like differently in your application process? And do you think you balanced your time well overall?
I think overall I did balance my time well. I think I briefly mentioned this, but I do wish I started doing a little bit more writing earlier because I did try to give writing a few shots during the summer, but I don't think I ever really like stuck with that PIQ. I kept scrapping the ones I did in the summer, and then I really focused during the fall semester. I think that if I would like go back and revise, I probably would have like tried to write more during that summer. But also knowing myself, I was taking a summer class which required a lot of writing, so that was definitely a bit difficult for me.
Okay. Last question. So, would you give like any high school students tips in terms of extracurricular programs and pursuing their interests?
In terms of extracurricular programs and pursuing their interests, okay. In terms of extracurriculars, I think it's just very good to go out and explore. So if your high school offers a lot of opportunities, like a lot of clubs, if your high school has an ASB that's well funded, I think it's definitely worth your time to join that. The people I know who have done those things generally do pretty well with their college applications. In terms of exploring your interests, I would say that you really want to just take a big variety of classes and figure out what you really enjoy. I think that's one of those things that didn't take advantage of enough during high school. My high school places a really, really big emphasis on obtaining an AA degree or becoming IGETC certified, which actually really limits what classes you take and when you take them. So if I was given a chance to be in an environment or if I was told to not go for an AA during high school, I feel like I would have given myself more opportunities to take different classes. And I might have figured out what I wanted to do a little bit earlier and just gain more skills along the way.
All right, thank you so much. That's all the questions we have. So we're gonna open it up to the audience now.
Right.
Does anybody have any questions for Teresa that they would like to ask? You can also just put it in the chat if you don't want to unmute.
Hi, Teresa. I have a question around your ability to balance all these things. Apparently, you did a lot of volunteering work, extracurricular stuff, and it seems like your high school was also quite demanding. So can you give us some idea what your high school hours and what your life is like, and how do you balance all of those things?
That's actually a really good question. Sometimes I wonder how I did it in freshman year. Um, I will say that sometimes it's just how periods of your time are concentrated. For example, sometimes when I was volunteering, I would pull really long hours to do volunteering work. I remember when I did my first virtual online camp, I actually spent 40 hours in 1 week just volunteering, moderating that Zoom meeting, posting blogs. So that was super busy. And then sometimes with academics, those are a lot more concentrated. For example, I actually have taken multiple 5 week winter classes. So you take an entire semester worth of content in 5 weeks. So for me, those demands shift throughout the year. But to maintain my personal health and mental health, both mentally and physically, I tried to schedule time for myself to do things that I like. For example, in my junior year of high school, I picked up a new hobby. I did some crocheting. And even before that, I would try to find time at the end of the night. For example, I sometimes would play clarinet or play saxophone, or I would just take some time at the end of my day to do a little bit of skincare, spend time with my brother, things like that, which kind of helped to balance things out. In fact, when I was doing my college applications in my fall semester senior year, I actually ended up taking some jujitsu classes as a way to do some additional physical activity while I was balancing the stress from the schoolwork and the college application process. So for me, it's mainly just about building in some time for me to take care of myself so that I can also pay attention to everything else going on in my life.
Ooh,
I have a question.
yeah, go
Um,
ahead.
how did you work to incorporate hobbies such as your crocheting into your college application? And do you think that made you more like unique and stand out as an applicant?
Oh, that's actually such a good question. I really wanted to touch on this actually. So in my college application, I actually ended up writing things like crochet and jujitsu in my extracurricular section. And I think that kind of helped me stand out as an applicant in the sense that I'm willing to share some more personal aspects of my life with my admissions officers and give them a bit more of a well-rounded look at who I am as a person. So with crocheting, it's not, I try to expand on it more than just saying, oh, I crochet like 3 times a week. I talked about how sometimes when I crochet, I will give the things I've made to other people as a gift, or how jujitsu really helped me get like a better understanding of self, especially since I got to try new things. Since jujitsu is a close contact sport and I've never done anything like that before.
Okay, thank you. I have a really quick follow-up question.
Yes.
How did you incorporate cheer or like other service organizations in general into your application?
So I did that in a few ways. So one of the main ways you can do that is there's a section when you're writing on your college application, it just tells you to talk about your additional activities, so extracurriculars, responsibilities, and things like that. So one of the ways I did that was simply by writing about my extracurricular and volunteer work in that section. Sometimes if there was a very major project or something I did, I would list that out as something separately. Another thing I chose to do when I was writing my college applications was that sometimes I would directly talk about my volunteer work and my PIQs. Since I spent so much time in doing volunteering events and things like that, I talked about that very specifically, I believe, in 2 of my PIQs. And I think that was a very nice way of weaving it in as a way of demonstrating how I'm not doing this volunteering just for the sake of volunteering. There's definitely more of a personal background and a personal history on why I'm doing these things.
Hi, Teresa. May I ask you a question?
Yes.
I noticed that currently a lot of university is incorporating the new medias, like encourage students to send videos to them. Do you have experience on that and can share any interesting ideas about that?
I actually did not have to send in any videos for my college application process. I know that there are certain schools in the UC system who require that. However, I did not end up applying to any of those. But I'm definitely aware that this is a thing.
There's also a question in the chat, I think.
Oh, can one of you read it out to me? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, I can read it. So, oh wait, you want to read it?
You can read it, Jeffrey. It's fine.
Okay. So, Andreas asked, you've completed your general education at your high school, right? Does that mean you will graduate from UC Berkeley in 2 years?
Oh, that's a really interesting question. So, from just a purely credits perspective, it might look that way. However, from a actually have to take specific classes approach, I will probably take around 3 years to graduate. Despite completing most of my general education requirements, there's still a lot of major prerequisites I have to take, lower division and upper division classes. So that will definitely take a good amount of time. I'm in no rush, so I'm probably going to end up taking 3 years for my bachelor's degree. Although I will
RJ?
say if I went to
Oh.
a CSU school, sorry, just to quickly
It's
elaborate.
okay.
It's
If I
okay.
went to a CSU, I could probably graduate in 2 years. I believe if I went to a school like CSUN, I would actually have junior standing, so I could graduate in two. That is a possibility. I do see a hand from RJ. Do you want to ask your question?
Yeah, how did you study for the SAT test?
Okay, that's a very good question. First of all, I want to preface it by saying that none of the schools I applied to actually require the SAT. Both the CSU and UC system are completely test blind. However, I did still take the SAT because there are some benefits. The main way I studied for it was by taking some practice tests and using Khan Academy. I thought that was actually quite helpful in learning about test structure, question types, figuring out what I needed to do. I actually only took the SAT once just because I wanted a score in case I would end up needing it in the future. If I had to give a tip about doing stuff for the SAT, it's definitely to practice, make sure you look at practice tests, make sure you focus on the questions that you struggle with more. But also from a slightly different perspective, make sure that you register early. I registered a little bit late and I had to drive all the way out to Antelope Valley to take my SAT. So please register early so you can take your test close to home if possible. I think I think there was another question in chat. Wait, I don't think so.
If nobody has any more questions, I have a question to ask. So you didn't use like the Common App website, right? The one that you would use to apply for privates to apply to any of your colleges?
Yeah, so I didn't use the Common App because I didn't apply to any schools through the Common App.
Okay. So then for the UC one, is there also like a section where you can put your all your activities, correct? Like
Yes, there's a section where you can put all of your different activities. I believe you have up to 20 that you can write in. I
is
might not
there like
remember.
sorry. Is there
Sorry,
like
keep
a
going.
like when you explain your activity, is there a word limit? Because for the Common App one, you can only put like 100 words and it's really hard to fit everything in there.
So there is a word limit. It's definitely over 100 words from what I
Mhm.
remember, but you do have to be very concise. I think most of these sections have word limits. I remember, actually, there's also character limits when you're writing in organization names. For example, the name and cheer is actually quite long, and the UC system wouldn't let me put the entire name at the very front. So I spent a good 15 minutes trying to figure out how to abbreviate all of these words so that they can understand what I'm saying without writing out the full thing. So that can be something to watch out for.
Mhm.
And when you're writing those descriptions, you also want to be pretty concise. I chose to write bullet points of different things, and that helped me put in as much information as possible while like keeping everything clean.
Thank you. Is there any more questions from the audience? I saw a lot of people just join, so.
Um, how did you balance playing two instruments?
So I do play two instruments. However, I don't play them as much as I used to. My school actually doesn't have a band program, so I just play them for my own enjoyment from time to time. I played clarinet for definitely a little bit longer. I started playing clarinet in fourth grade and it ended at around eighth grade. That was actually the one I played a little bit more during high school since I tutored kids on the clarinet. However, I still do play saxophone. I think that's the one I'm leaning towards more nowadays. Yeah. It's just something I do for my own enjoyment. It's not super consistent, but it's definitely good to have when you're a little bit stressed.
Oh yeah. Andrea asked another question in chat. She said, "Did you hire a counselor for your college application?"
So I did end up finding someone to help me with writing my PIQs. I would say like partway through fall semester. We didn't do too much work extensively. It was very specific of just like, here's what I currently have for my PIQs. Can you help me revise? I did think that was pretty helpful because he was someone who used to work with this stuff. He actually switched career paths by the time we reached out to him. But I think that was kind of nice to have a second pair of eyes and someone who had a bit more insight onto the college application process. I
I
think
think
I see a hand from RJ.
Yeah. So, as you said earlier that you applied to many different colleges. So, if you did, like, was there like a personal essay for each of them? And if so, could you explain how you managed your time for all of them and wrote like
So I did apply to quite a few colleges. I applied to 10 in total. However, I actually only had two college application portals. So the CSU system, or at least for CSUN, they didn't require any writing from me. So I didn't have to worry about writing for that particular application. And for the rest of the schools, the 9 UC schools, there's only one application, which has 4 PIQs with a word limit of, I think it's 350 words each. So I only had to write the 4 PIQs, which was surprisingly stressful because there's so much you want to say, but you only have 350 words to say at all. So that one I was able to manage pretty okay. One of the things I like to do when I was writing is that I would write in short bursts. Because 350 words technically isn't a lot, I would set a timer for 20 minutes, spend 20 minutes writing one PIQ, stop, take a break, and then come back to revisit it. I think that can be pretty helpful because sometimes if you're staring at a screen for hours on hours, you're going to get very tired. So for me, that approach worked very well. I'm not sure how it would, how different people would employ it if they have tens of supplements to write, but it definitely worked in my case. And I think it could be worth a shot for you to try as well.
thank you.
For the PIQs, like for the UCs, do you recommend like writing out like a statement for each question? Because there's 8 questions, right? And you only choose from 4 of them. Would you recommend like writing out something for each of them and then just going back later and seeing which 4 are probably the best ones you can write about?
Hmm. I think that's definitely one way to approach it. The way I approached it was that I actually removed all of the questions I knew I didn't want to answer. And then from what I had remaining, that's what I kind of brainstormed on because there's certain things that I didn't really want to write about.
Hmm.
So I first filtered out questions and then I started brainstorming to continue filtering it out.
All right, thank you. Does anyone have any more questions? If not, I think we can end the meeting here. There will be a recording posted on Cheers like YouTube channel in like I feel like a few days maybe. So if you miss like the first half, then you can go on to that channel. I'll send an email about it and watch the interview again. Thank you again, Teresa, for being here with us today. We really appreciate you giving us all this advice, and hopefully, the audience can take in a lot of consideration to what you said into their own like college application process and high school experience. And like last call for questions because we're gonna end it now. No? Okay. Well,
All
thank
right.
you, Jeffrey, and thank you, Teresa. And thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Gianna, too.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.